Maurice Jones-Drew is expected not to be there week 1 of the regular season for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it seems that he's fighting a losing battle. He has 2 years left on his contract. I actually have it in front of me right here. 2 years remaining on a 5-year deal. He's scheduled to make $4.45 million this year and $4.95 million next year. And he doesn't like that, considering the fact we literally this offseason just watched Matt Forte get $8 million a year, Ray Rice get $8 million a year, and Jones-Drew is coming off of being the rushing champion from this year, having over, 1,600 rushing yards this past season. So he feels it's time for him to get paid, and he deserves his money. And the Jacksonville Jaguars' opinion is, well, we gave you a heavy front-loaded contract, and now that your front-loaded money is gone, you want a new deal, but we own you for 2 more years. So my question is, should Jacksonville trade him? And if they should, where do you think would be a good destination for him to go?
Well, I have the perfect trade for Jacksonville, truthfully.
He has the perfect trade, ladies and gentlemen. He has the perfect trade.
Well, I think the trade that would make the most sense for both teams involved, Maurice Jones-Drew goes to the New York Jets for Tim Tebow and a draft pick. I think that would be a perfect trade for both teams. I think Tebow's a terrible fit with the Jets. And as far as Jones-Drew goes, I get that in the NFL, because the contracts aren't always guaranteed, it really is a case where if you go down, you stand to lose everything, basically. And we all know Jones-Drew has had kind of a history of injuries. The last couple of years have really been his most healthy seasons in a really long time. Well, not really long time, probably a couple of years. But there's always speculation on his knees and everything, and as he gets older, he's taking a lot of pounding. He needs to get it. He feels he needs to get his money before he runs out. Now, it's very true. He took the front-loaded contract. He should have known what he was getting into before he signed the contract. And if you know anything about the Jaguars owner, he is kind of in the owner of Mike Brown, the owner of the Bengals. And if you remember what Carson Palmer tried to do with the Bengals last year, it didn't work with him. Khan is not going to, I believe the guy's name is Shahid Khan.
Yes.
He's not going to listen to demands from Jones-Drew. He's not going to move unless it's a trade that actually helps him, or if it's a reason that he sees fit. He's not going to jump just because Jones-Drew tells him to jump. So he probably is fighting a losing battle, and if he does sit out, it's probably a good chance that they're not going to make a trade just because he sits out, because they do have Rashad Jennings, who's put together a pretty good preseason coming back off of his own injury. The team is probably going to be terrible if he doesn't play. I mean, one way or another, as much as Jennings could be good, the defenses aren't going to respect Jennings the same as they do Jones-Drew, and it's just going to wind up creating a lot of problems for second-year Blaine Gabbert, who probably has been rushed into action way too prematurely.
Yeah, he was definitely a guy, based on what you watched last year, that could have probably used a year on the bench to watch the game, see it, try to have it slow down a little bit for him. Because, I mean, he looked like a scared little kid last year in the pocket. He looked petrified.
Yeah, to put it simply, if you've ever seen the movie The Replacements, Gene Hackman has the great line in it, should have been carrying a clipboard that first year instead of trying to carry your teammates. Yeah. That's basically the position he was put in last year. So,
see, the interesting thing is, I think Jacksonville has made these moves to get weapons around him. They went and drafted Blackman. They signed Laurent Robinson from Dallas last year. And the interesting, you got Mercedes Lewis, who just was gone last year.
He fell off a cliff.
Nobody even knows who his name is at this point of the year. I don't even think I know anybody that drafted him in a fantasy draft. I think but I like the moves they made. I like Laurent Robinson. I like, Blackman as a wide receiver. I think both guys are great options, and I think that they can help develop Gabbert to make him a little bit of a better wide receiver. But Jones-Drew, to me, for that team is the key piece. And I actually think that a Jones-Drew trade to the Jets would be a great trade. But like it was mentioned in our chat room by Eric, Jacksonville already passed on TiVo when Denver was trying to trade him out of Denver so that they can, once they got Peyton, and on top of that, Jacksonville's his hometown, play college at Florida, so on and so forth. So everybody thinks it's a perfect fit for Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
But apparently the Jacksonville Jaguars don't feel that way either.
No, they did, and I definitely remember them passing on it. The only reason why I bring it up is you just got to wonder how much of the Jones-Drew stuff they're going to take. And if Gabbert doesn't wind up working out for him, and truthfully, if Jones-Drew doesn't play, I don't think it's going to work out for him. I think Robinson and Blackman are great players. I think the Cowboys are going to wind up missing out not having Robinson as their third receiver this year.
Yeah.
Not saying they should have matched that contract, but they're going to suffer not having that third wide receiver. He's a good one. Blackman, right now, the knock on him is that he's still pretty raw. I've heard that he's had pretty good showings this preseason, but he's going to need time to develop. And to expect him to be a legitimate number 1 or number 2 wide receiver at this point right now, I just don't know how far you think you're going to get on that one. And so I just think maybe things have changed with them. I'm not saying they'd consider it. From what I heard, both sides earlier this week kind of rebuffed the idea on that because I know it was kind of a little bit of rampant speculation. I kind of disagree on that, though. I just think it would work out pretty good for him. If Jones-Drew is unhappy and he's not going to play for you anyway, you have the opportunity of upgrading a quarterback because I think Tebow would wind up fitting in there. I think he's a little bit more head on a swivel ready than Blaine Gabbert is at this career because they don't really have an offensive line. They need a quarterback who can adjust like that. And Gabbert can't do that right now.
Yeah. And I definitely agree with what you're saying. I think the most interesting or, quote-unquote exciting part of this idea, if anything, is what Maurice Jones-Drew could do for the New York Jets offense. The impact he would have on, the ground and pound mentality is unbelievable. I mean, I love, they call him like, what was it, the rolling pinball or something. Whatever that little nickname is. The guy's a freak, dude. I mean, I don't care how big he is. I don't care that he's, half the size of some of the guys in the NFL. I just don't care. He plays with such a heart and passion for the game that it compensates for all of it.
Absolutely,
and I think that the trade itself is far-fetched and more of, as it was mentioned in our chat room, it's more of a Jets fan's dream by Eric. And I completely agree with that. It really is. And I think it's interesting. A lot of people would like to see Maurice Jones-Drew go to the Jets. Of course people would like to see that. I mean, he's been holding out now for 35 days. But my thing is this. It's hard to pick a side in a situation like this. As if I'm a Jaguar fan, I just want Maurice Jones-Drew on the field. I don't care who's right. I don't care who's wrong. I want Maurice Jones-Drew on the field. So, as a fan, that's all you're thinking. You're not worried about who's right, who's wrong. You're not looking at it like that. Yeah. Now, from just a football perspective, in my opinion, I think that Maurice Jones-Drew needs to get his ass on the field for the simple fact that they have you signed under contract for 2 years. If you don't start showing up, they're fining you $30,000 a day.
Yeah.
Not a week, a day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like one day. That's like 5 days in a week. $150,000 in a week. People would kill to make that in a year.
No, absolutely. And you do have to wonder if he really is going to hold out for the course of the season. I mean, players holding out at the beginning of the season is really nothing new. Mike Wallace just wound up joining the Steelers this week, actually. He was holding out for the last couple months. But everybody wants to see it end quickly. And I think it will wind up ending probably within the next couple weeks because I don't think the Jaguars are going to wind up budging. But in the end, it is about what's best for the Jaguars. And if Jones-Drew, who really should probably just wind up playing. But obviously, the NFL, it is all about making the money you can while you can because not all the contracts are guaranteed. And if you go down, the team basically has the right to cut you at the end of the season if they feel like waiting that long. So there are pros and cons for both sides. But he probably should just wind up doing his job, doing what they paid him to do.
Yeah. Honestly, I just thought of this thinking about the fact, knowing that you're a Cowboy fan. Obviously, I'm a Cowboy fan. This is something where now I was only like 7 or 6 when this took place, so I don't, remember the details of it. But I know that this happened with Emmitt Smith in the early '90s. I think it was '90, right after after they won their first Super Bowl.
I know exactly.
And he held out because he wanted a new contract. I think he had 2 years on his deal still left, and then he missed the first 2 games of the season. They started off 0-2. Jerry Jones finally breaks and gives him a brand new contract.
Yeah.
And I think Jones-Drew could end up getting a similar situation as that because, let's be honest, Jacksonville without Maurice Jones-Drew is not likely to do very good. I mean, no disrespect to Blaine Gabbert, but I don't see him as a man that's going to carry the team. No disrespect to Rashad Jennings, but he has been he's only in the 2nd or 3rd year of his career. I mean, he's still new. But
I think it may be 3rd or 4th, actually, but he was hurt last year, so it's probably the same thing all around. As I say, I think it comes down to a difference in the ownership. I think when the Emmitt Smith one happened, I think, and I can't really remember because I was pretty young when that one happened myself, but, Jerry Jones did what was best for his team, and he probably wasn't as stubborn as some of the other owners recently has shown they can be. I brought up the Bengals earlier. This guy, Shahid Khan, from everything I've read, he's probably one of the most eccentric owners in the league. So it really does all depend on the mentality. Everything I've read, though, I don't really think he's breaking, even if Jones-Drew were to hold out 5 games.
Okay. So you think that he's going to look at it and say, you can keep paying your fines and we're going to keep just taking your money and we'll move on.
I think he's going to wind up doing it until someone brings him an offer like the one the Raiders made the Bengals last year. I think that's the only way he winds up making a trade, if it is completely advantageous to the franchise to do it. Otherwise, he's going to let him sit.
And see, that's the funny thing, too, is the fact, well, I don't know if it's a funny thing, but you look at this situation and you got to say to yourself, nobody's going to give up that much for any running back in the NFL. At this point of a Maurice Jones-Drew career, your first-round picks are long-term investments. Mm-hmm. Your second-round picks are at least a 3 to 4 year investment.
Yeah.
Your third-round picks are usually at least a 3-year investment. Mm-hmm. So those are your top 3 picks that are long-term investments, at least within a 3-year time span. So are you going to trade those away where you can bring in guys that can help your team for the long term, or are you going to trade them to get one guy who is going to come in, is with you for this season and next season, and then you have no idea whether he's going to want to re-sign with you, if you want to even use a franchise tag on him. Like, you really don't know where it's going to go. Mm-hmm. I've said this numerous times talking about running backs. They are a dime a dozen. No disrespect to Maurice Jones-Drew or the Adrian Petersons or the Arian Fosters that are out there, but for the majority of running backs, they are a dime a dozen. That is why so many teams have running back by committee situations, because of the fact that injuries are so prone, mm-hmm. shelf life is so short, and they're required to do so much. Sometimes you got a guy that's a great running back that when it comes down to just running the ball, but he's not that good at pass catching or pass protection, so you have to have your third down running back to come in and do that for you. I think Mojo's a complete running back, mm-hmm. but at the same time, he's already got miles.
He has a lot of miles.
So that's where the downfall mm-hmm. comes.
The one thing you have to remember is, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but I don't think he's ever had one season with over 260 carries. Now, he does have a lot of receptions every year, so that winds up balancing it out. But he's got miles, not as much as the guys who carry for over 300 times a season, though. They have been good in that one. But what was I going to say? I'm sorry, I kind of lost my track.
I really like what Fife put in our chat room. Fife mentions that, running backs seem like they want to get paid for what they have done, mm-hmm. not what they are going to do. And I think that's a really great way to phrase it. Running backs are like, look, I've given you, 1,300 yards the past 3 years straight. Mm-hmm. I've scored over 10 touchdowns each year. And I want my money.
My counter to that would be I agree with that, but I also feel you can say that about wide receivers too. Mike Wallace kind of just did that earlier this season. There seems to be always one wide receiver.
There's always one.
Yeah, I think Brandon.
The divas of the NFL.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Brandon Marshall had his one a couple years ago, I think. Crabtree had his while
when
he
got drafted,
and
yeah.
that has worked out so well for him, hasn't it? He's come back so quick from that. But I think the main reason, like you were saying, that the running backs have become a dime a dozen, it's the injuries, but I think a lot of it is just the emphasis on the pass the last couple of years. If you look, last year, how many quarterbacks passed for over 4,000 yards? I think it was a record number last year,
It was, right? I want to say like 13.
It was definitely
almost half the league. Almost half the league starting quarterbacks
and
for $4,000.
Yeah, and if you're passing 90% of the time, you're not really worried about giving carries to one specific running back. You could do kind of a committee. You can have the guy in the field who's better at pass blocking. You can have the guy on the field who's better at screen passes. You can have whichever guy you want because you're going more pass offense. And the emphasis of the two tight ends has probably hurt that too.
Oh, yeah. The two tight end sets used to be for power run games, and now it's for spreading you out because linebackers can't cover athletic guys.